I now request the dignitaries to kindly come forward for lighting the lamp. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to request Dr. Jyoti Chandiramani to give the opening remarks.
Chancellor Sir, Dr. Muzumdar, our Vice Chancellor Ma'am, Dr. Rajni Gupte, the keynote speaker, chief guest for today, Dr. Martin Rama, all our distinguished speakers, galaxy of intellectuals who have come to Pune, our wonderful students, all of you, a warm welcome once again. This conference would not have happened if it were not for the support of the university, who gave us both the financial support as well as intellectual thoughts and inputs in proceeding with this conference. I'd like everyone to give a big round of applause for this, because the university gave us 15 lakhs for this conference, and I think that itself goes a long way in being able to realize our objectives in where we move. This conference would not have happened if I had not rung up Rajat Kathuria and asked him, "Sir, can we have you as our knowledge partner?" And they partnered 2 tracks with us, one which was the morning one, which you saw, an extremely invigorating track, and the other one which is going to happen on labor reforms this afternoon. It would not have happened if I had not spoken to Alak Sharma ji from IHD, who said, "Jyoti, I'm with you." And within 2 days, I had the list of speakers, and that was the first track where the list of speakers completely got finalized by him. I thank each and every one of you who have consented to come here. I have to thank Janak Nabar, who has patiently been working with us from STEER, who has been here. And I'm sure we're going to have a very long association, because both of us are located in Pune, with the track on productivity, technology, innovations, and its link with employment. It's going to go beyond that. From here, I have to mention that we've had long associations through our international office with Asia Europe Foundation, and a representative from there is going to be talking in the track on education. We also have on board Macquarie University, which we had a track on Skype with them. And the next is we've had a long association even with UNDP, because we had the last international conference on Transforming India 2030 Strategies for Sustainable Development Goals. Moving ahead, post this conference, I'd like to just talk about a couple of things that came out over the last few days. I remember in yesterday's talk, Rakesh Basantji talking about how multidisciplinary perspectives need to be there in research. And I think you must have seen that in the film, as well as in our intent, and the manner in which we have collaborated with so many people, so many organizations, institutions, and think tanks, and how we are going to move ahead. In fact, this very conference is also partnered by 2 of our own institutions, SIBM, which has a program in entrepreneurship and innovation, and it's our leadership, management institution, and the Symbiosis Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. About SSE, many of you who are here are visiting it for the first time. And in this first time, we are an institution, as you know, established in 2008. We've completed 10 years, and in these 10 years, we concentrated on building our academics very strong. The BSc Economics Honors and the MSc Economics, with 3 specializations till now: International Trade, Development Studies, and probably the only school of economics which offers a specialization in urban development. We felt this would be the need of the hour. This would create a class of employable youth to take care of urban issues, which we keep reading in newspapers day in, day out. To give more breadth and depth to our master's program from next year, this academic year, that means 2019-20, we are even going to be offering an MSc in economics with a specialization in finance. Having moved from our academic pursuits, research has caught up in our agenda and has been the focus of the university. And we have just released the report with NABARD, where we worked for NABARD on Maharashtra on developing the Rural Development Infrastructure Index for 33 districts of Maharashtra. Work is in progress on the Urban Governance Index for the state of Goa. We are also working with ITDP on the congestion pricing for Mumbai. And we've also got another project on sustainable development goals for rural districts of Maharashtra. Work is in progress with this. With this humble beginning, with 21 faculty, over 500 students, and 1,000 alumni, we reach out to all of you to extend your support in a manner that's going to strengthen the school to be one of those that could be reckoned with as a leading institution among the top 5 in times to come. I hope FECO is just an occasion for us to meet and talk about employment, but the conversations will go far beyond that. I once again welcome all and hope the proceedings keep moving ahead. I can see the bar in each track going up, and I hope it just moves that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti ma'am, for giving us a brief about the conference, SIU and SSC. It is an honor to have amongst us the founder and chancellor of the university, Dr. S.B. Muzumdar sir. Deeply touched by the hardships suffered by the foreign students, especially Afro-Asian students studying in Pune, he established in 1971 Symbiosis with the view to help them and provide them a home away from home. His efforts towards promoting internationalization based on his principles of one world family has brought comfort and warmth to many lives. Dr. Muzumdar sir is the recipient of awards Padam Shri, Padam Bhushan, and is also the recipient of the first Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Memorial Award. May I now request Dr. S.B. Muzumdar sir to kindly deliver the Chancellor's address.
Namaste. Dr. Maruti Drama, the Vice Chancellor Dr. Gupti, Dr. Chandi Ramani, Director of Symbiosis School of Economics, Dr. Thakur, the Deputy Director of SIE, invited dignitaries and my dear students. It is indeed a pleasure for me to attend this conference. And this conference is going to deliberate one of the most serious challenges which we are facing. When we say we, which means India is facing. But in reality, employment is a challenge even in developed countries like the USA, the UK, even in China. So employment or rather unemployment has become a global issue. And when we think of unemployment and employability in India, the picture is very sad. India has 134 crores of population. And out of 134 crores of population, 50% population is below 25. That is 67 crores constitute young population of this country, and therefore India is a very, very young country in the world. Let us compare this population to America. American population is 62 crores, total population, which means the young population of India is twice the total population of America. The population in the UK is 6 crores, which means young population of our country is 10 times more than the total population of the UK. And these 67 crores of young men and women, boys and girls, pose a great challenge before all of us. This tremendous population of young men and women should be converted into a human resource. And if we fail to do that, we will miss the bus. And here I would like to say something about the demographic dividend. Fortunately, we are in that beautiful golden period of demographic dividend, when the birth rate falls, aged population is less, and the working population is more, young population is more. And therefore, if we want to convert the young population into human resource, as I said, we have to find out some immediate solutions. And in any country, I believe, education is the oxygen of development. It is through education that we can solve such problems, and therefore education plays a big role in our country. And it is directly related to the employment, which is the present subject of our conference. All of us know that for all these years we have been opening colleges and universities for conventional education. BA, BSc, BCom. And these students who pass out from colleges and universities hardly find jobs. And why? Because they are unemployable. And in order to make them employable, conventional education is not enough, is not required. Then what type of education do we want? We want a different kind of education, different type of colleges, different type of universities. And that type of education has been correctly identified by our popular and beloved Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And he has come out with the slogan, Skill India. Because unless these youth have one or the other skill, they are not of any use either to themselves, to their families, or to the community, or to the country for that matter. And therefore, skill development education has assumed considerable importance in these days. And our government has started skill development corporations, skill development cells, and they are going to have extremely good jobs. They are creating billions of jobs every year. Now these, if we succeed in reaping the advantages of demographic dividend, then these skilled youth will not be useful only in our country, but we can also send them to other countries like European countries. And in European countries, there is increase in aging population. And this is a golden opportunity for our country to send our young, skilled population abroad. And that constitutes our human resource, or human wealth, I will call. And therefore I plead to these experts who are assembled here, how to find out ways and means to eliminate unemployment, how to skill our youth, and thereby how to reap the advantages of demographic dividend. Government has really floated wonderful schemes. For example, Symbiosis has now started skill university in Pune. Another skill university we have started in Madhya Pradesh, in Indore. And believe me, we are giving them skill education not only at lower level or middle level, but even at higher level. Because when we say of skills, normally we feel that skilled person means plumber, driver, carpenter, but no. Even in B, management, skills are also required, and any subject includes in it one or other kind of skill. And therefore skilling India is perhaps the right solution to the challenge of unemployment. And I am glad that our government is thinking very seriously about this problem. And I am sure that in years to come, India will boast of its young, skilled manpower, which will not only make India a developed country, but will also benefit the entire world. And then our country will indeed be a Jagat Guru, as our Prime Minister Narendra Modi often says. With these few words, I thank all the dignitaries who are participating in this meaningful conference. I wish you all the best. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable insights on establishing the linkages between education, skill development, and employment. Dr. Martin Rama is the Chief Economist for the South Asia region of the World Bank, based in Delhi, India. Prior to moving to World Bank operations, Sir spent 10 years with the research department of the World Bank, mainly in Washington, D.C., while providing support to a large number of developing countries. The main focus of his work has been on labor issues. In 2013, he was the director to the World Development Report on Jobs. Sir, it is a pleasure to have you amongst us today. Without much delay, I now request Dr. S.B. Muzumdar Sir to kindly felicitate Dr. Martin Rama. Thank you, sir. I now request Dr. Martin Rama to deliver the keynote address.
Chancellor Mazumdar sir, Vice Chancellor, Dr. Gupta, Jyoti, friends. It's really an honor for me to be here today. When Jyoti invited me several months ago, I knew that this would be very close to my departure from the region. And in fact, this is my last engagement in this capacity. Next week, I'm closing what has been an extremely stimulating and rewarding cycle as the chief economist for South Asia for 6 years, based in Delhi. And I have always insisted in being based in country, which is not the norm at the World Bank, because I think that being where the debates happen, being where conversations like this one take place, is extremely enriching to understand the progress of the country. And I was all the more delighted when Jyoti invited me, because I have been involved on issues related to employment for quite many years. And so in a way, this is in closing this cycle started to me with wrapping up the World Development Report on Jobs 2013 on the topic of this conference. This engagement is very much related to that. So what I want to do is to take the opportunity of being with you here in this, by the way, fabulous campus. It's my first time in the Symbiosis campus, and I'm full of admiration for what has been built. Really impressive. I want to use this address to bring to you a few issues from research, both across countries, but also recent research and ongoing research from our teams in relation to India. And I want to basically address 3 points with a bit more detail, but just to give you the storyline. First is how do we see the employment challenges of India at this point, in a very succinct way. Second is going forward, as the digital revolution unfolds, what is going to change? What are the additional challenges and opportunities that will arise? And third, finally, taking from that diagnostic and prognostic, what is that we should think in terms of policies for employment. So let me start. Let me start with the current employment challenges. And let me start with why employment is so important. At the World Bank, our mandate is related to poverty reduction. We are supposed to be helping our member countries on issues of poverty reduction. And one very first important reason why jobs matter so much is because much of the progress on poverty reduction in the world happens through jobs. Of course, transfers, support, social protection are important, and we hear much more of that, obviously, when we are close to election times. There's much more thinking about this. But this is from studies. On the left panel is a study for the World Development Report on Jobs. On the right panel is a study where I was involved with colleagues at the World Bank office in Delhi about what was behind transitions out of poverty in different countries. If you look at people who were in poor households at one period, and you look at them again when they have escaped poverty, what has changed between these 2 points in time? And several things can change. One, of course, is they get assets, or their assets are valued more, or they get transfers. So there are things that are not directly related to their work. You may inherit, you may become the beneficiary of some pension program or something. But you also have incomes that may come from your assets or your business or your small business. But a lot of the change, the blue part that you see, the light blue that you see on the left, and the orange part you see on the right, are all from labor income. Not necessarily wage employment, labor income. Most of the transitions out of poverty are related to jobs. Most of the movements into the middle class are related to jobs. Sometimes, if you look at the gray part on the right, if you look at the dark blue part on the left, that's the point that Mazumdar sir was referring to about the demographic dividend. If you go from a family of 2 adults and 4 children to a family of 2 adults and 2 children, even with the same labor income, the labor income per capita becomes higher. So one part is that change in composition. But the biggest single element to get out of poverty is jobs. So that's the first point I wanted to make. Second point is, if we look at it from that perspective, countries in South Asia and India in particular are facing a challenge. So it may be difficult to see the numbers from there. Let me tell you what this figure has in it. On the horizontal axis, you have the income per capita of the countries. So the more you go to the right, the richer the countries. On the horizontal axis, you have the employment rate. And for the very good reasons that Professor Goes gave us in the first very stimulating session today, I will be looking at employment rates, not unemployment rates, because the meaning of unemployment in developing countries where people who are poor cannot afford to be idle is not very informative. You can still have a lot of people working and with a lot of distress and underemployment. So I will be looking at employment rates. And here, an employment rate is the ratio between the people who are working and the people who are of working age, 15 and above. And so on the vertical axis, what you have is the employment rate of countries, and each dot is a country, the most recent information we can have. And you see that the things are quite scattered, but overall in the world we have this relationship that I will be referring to several times during my talk, which we call the U-shaped curve. Typically, as countries prosper, a lot of people can afford not to work, can afford to send their children to school instead of having the children at work. The elderly can stop working. They don't need to work until just they die. They can have a period of rest. So you see a decline, and then with education and prosperity, with tertiary education, you see again a much higher participation. So you will expect, given the income per capita on the horizontal axis, you will say, okay, on average, countries should be on the yellow line. When you look at the countries in South Asia, which are marked by the red triangles, you have Nepal, Afghanistan, Bhutan are more or less where you could expect them to be. But you look at Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, and they are way below. Way below. They are among the countries with really low employment rates. Now, when you look in more detail, this is not because employment rates among men are low. If I do this chart for men and women, for men, all of South Asia is almost exactly on the line, even slightly above. For women, it is much less. And not only it is much less, but in general, it has been falling. Employment rates among women have been falling in South Asia, have been falling in India. They have not been falling in Bangladesh. I will come to that more. But why does this matter? It matters because part of the demographic dividend can be lost to it. The idea of the demographic dividend is, even if people do not become more productive, because you have more working bodies over the total population, just because there are fewer children, you have more productivity. It's a composition effect. Now, if at the same time as your working age population increases, your employment rate decreases, you are offsetting one with the other. You are missing on the demographic dividend. And this chart shows on the left South Asia, on the right East Asia. So these are countries, India, Bhutan, Bangladesh on one side, China, Philippines, Vietnam, etc. on the other side. And the light blue bar tells you by how much these countries over the last decade gained in terms of the share of the working age population to the total population. That's where you will expect the demographic dividend. The orange bar down tells you, because of the growth these countries experience, how much will you expect the employment rate to decline, as in the U-shaped curve. How will you expect, as children stay longer in school, as elder people stop working, you will expect some decline. And if the country grows a lot, you will expect a lot of decline. You see, for instance, China, first country on the right, had very strong growth. You could predict a strong decline in the employment rate. But the countries in East Asia had declines in employment rate that were as predicted, as in China, or even the opposite. Look, for instance, at Vietnam. Not only did the employment rate not decline, it increased. That amplified the demographic dividend. Look now at what is happening in South Asia. In South Asia, the blue bar, the employment rate, is sometimes so negative that it more than offsets the light blue bar. So that's a challenge, and of course there has been all sorts of discussions on how many jobs should be created. And I don't want to get into any political discussion here, it's just to look at the numbers. We had a report a year ago where we basically did what was a bit advocated in the previous panel here, which is to really look at all the data. We processed in detail more than 100 household surveys, population censuses across the region, just to have comparable data points. And we went really to the raw data because not all countries define things in the same ways. For instance, you have countries where collecting firewood or fetching water will be considered as work, countries where it will not. So we wanted to have comparable figures. And we used these figures to produce our estimate of how many people are at work in every country following ILO norms, and we considered 3 scenarios. How many jobs will be needed just to have a decline in employment rates like you could expect given the growth of the country. So to be on the U-shaped curve, not above, just starting from where you are, but just continuing on that trend. That's the ambitious scenario. So say, okay, we accept. Second, a bit more ambitious is just to keep employment rates constant. Just to, given the number of working age, the increase in the working age population, what will it take just to keep the employment rate constant? The third one is the ambitious. What will it take in 2 decades to catch up with the line, to go up to the yellow line you saw at the beginning? And you see that the numbers are quite staggering. We are talking about employment creation needs that are in the most modest case around 7 million people a year per India to much more than that. So this just to pose the challenge. Let me now move us to what else is happening that may create anxiety about the challenge. And one thing that is happening is the digital revolution. Everybody is talking about the fourth big transformation, and the digital revolution has many implications. It can be good, can be bad, creates a lot of accountability, creates risk of control, creates competition, but also creates market power. So it can go in either direction. But look at here on the right-hand side. One of the things that we can more or less predict that will happen quite a lot is a change in the types of jobs. And again, this was an issue that was very much discussed in the first session, is what types of jobs you have out there. Not what types of jobs in terms of sectors, farming, manufacturing, but do you have a job that is a wage job with an employer that is regular, where you know that today you work and next week you work, and you don't have an anguish on that? Or do you have wage employment that is casual? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, depends on the employer. Or are you self-employed? In developing countries and in South Asia in particular, regular wage employment, which one would think tends to be associated with what good jobs are, is not the norm at all. But if you think of advanced economies, they were built a lot into the model of regular wage employment. And we see even in advanced economies, this shift where digital technologies allow much more of the working through platforms as opposing to working for an employer. You can work as an Uber driver. You can work as a statistician through WeWork. You don't really know very well with whom you're working. So in a way, one concern that we see very strongly in advanced economies is that, now the labor market will start looking like the labor market of developing countries, where everybody is more or less an independent worker, almost like a casual wage worker over the internet. And so this has created a lot of anxiety. It has created also a lot of anxiety about jobs that can be replaced, because machines will be doing what other people used to do, before. So you have these anguishes about a world where robots do all the work, and we either sit on the back and manage to tax the robots to make a living, or the owners of the robots. So there is a lot of anxiety about the future of work. And one of the questions is, what does it imply for developing countries. A lot of that discussion is happening in advanced economies, but what does it imply for developing countries? So there have been attempts, sometimes sound a bit apocalyptic, to estimate how many jobs will be lost. And you remember, I ended the first block saying, you need a lot of jobs, and now we have this development that means, maybe jobs are going to disappear. And I would say there is a lot of catastrophic thinking into it. Let me show you two estimates, so I don't criticize anyone, I will criticize the World Bank. Okay? Let me show you two estimates that come from World Bank publications, very recent ones, big global publications, that try to estimate using the same methodology how many jobs will be lost to automation. So here's the first one, where you have a lot of countries here, and you have the diamonds are how many jobs are at risk of disappearing in each of these countries because of technology, and the bars are what is really feasible if you think the capacity of the country. You see the numbers are huge. We are talking of something like 35 to 60% of jobs at risk. It's phenomenal. Okay? If this is what is coming up, then we seriously are in deep trouble. This is another study from the World Bank using the same methodology. Now the countries are on the vertical axis. And now you see that the numbers are between 1 and 10% of the jobs. So same methodology, same organization. The point I want to make here is when you hear numbers about massive amount of jobs disappearing, be a good researcher, dig a bit more as to whether that's really something that we can believe. At the same time, new technologies create a lot of opportunities for jobs. This is a figure from the last World Development Report, which is called precisely the future of work, and which tends to be more optimistic about the future of work. And you see, it compares three types of interaction that has happened in retail services to households. One is IKEA. IKEA is a Swedish manufacturing of furniture coming to India now. And you see how many shops. It has been a huge success. 415 stores, 19 countries. Then you see Walmart. Not sure that Walmart is coming to India soon, but you see Walmart there. Walmart is like a big chain, big retail chain, big market power and standardization of suppliers. Almost 12,000 stores. And then you see Alibaba. Alibaba developed this thing that is called the Taobao village. The Taobao village, which is expanding very rapidly, is the idea where they take villages, and they started in China, but they're expanding that, and they basically help people in that village operate through the internet. So they come with training for marketing, finance for setting up, and so you have these villages that all of a sudden start selling furniture or fabric or whatever they are specializing in huge scale. And so on Taobao villages now you have 9 million merchants. So 400 stores, 12,000 stores, 9 million. And one point about this that is important I want to make is that in these apocalyptic views about the new technologies, one of the stories that we often embrace is that it will be a world where only the computer scientists will have a job and everybody else will be more or less idle. Taobao villagers are not computer scientists. These are villagers. I'm not sure whether the number is true, but in India there are said to be 1 million Ola and Uber drivers. These are not computer scientists. So it's easy to look at the job destruction side. We should not forget the job creation side. And while the picture is indeed worrying for advanced economies, my sense is that it creates an enormous opportunity for countries like India. Because there will be a lot of job creation, job destruction, but a lot of the job creation globally will be happening in developing countries. The X-rays that were read before in hospitals in advanced economies can be read now in India and diagnosed in India. Taobao villagers, Uber drivers, people having mobile phone accounts and operating through mobile phones. So the point of my second block is, this is interesting, and I will come to some of the policy implications, but we should not feel threatened. We should see it as an opportunity and how best it can be used. And if I have to say one country that is in a great position on anything that is digital, is India. Okay? A lot can be done here. You can be at the forefront. So the last block is, what are the implications of all this? Again, jobs are important. There will be a lot of job creation, job destruction coming up. There is a big challenge in terms of numbers. There is a big challenge in terms of the decline in female employment. When I was the director of the World Development Report, we thought quite hard and with very bright minds from around the world about how to address job challenges. And this was an area that was very polarized. You know, when you discuss job challenges, people often end up discussing labor policies, labor rigidity, labor flexibility, and it becomes very heated very soon after. So that's probably a bit narrow, given the magnitude of the topic. Jobs cuts across. And so what we took in what was, I think, a bit innovative was to think not through a labor economics perspective, but through a public economics perspective. So when you think about public economics, think about pollution. The way you think about public economics is that there are things where there are spillovers to the rest of society that individuals do not appropriate or are not penalized for, and therefore do not internalize in your behavior. If you pollute, that doesn't affect your profits, so you can just go ahead and pollute. And what do you do in those cases? You try to make people internalize those behaviors. And we thought with jobs something similar happens. You have jobs that have very high spillovers for society. Think, again, in this region, women at work. Women at work is not just income. Women at work is changing the way decisions are made at home. When women get more of the income, we know it, there is more that goes into health, there is more that goes into educational investments. It's empowerment in society. Think of jobs for young men in conflict situations. That also has a social spillover. When there are no opportunities, then people start getting restless and can become violent. And there can be also negative things. Think of countries that have oil and use the oil to create artificial jobs. Those are jobs that have little value for society. And so we thought the first thing is know your priorities, know where your gaps are. Here you need jobs for women, you need jobs in cities. Jobs in cities have enormous spillovers. They are called agglomeration effects, where you make other people more productive just because of that density. So if you look at this from this perspective, you identify your priorities. A bit as was mentioned before, in the economic survey, Rajat mentioned that, this idea that the garment sector is a big employer of women, unskilled women. In Bangladesh, it has been one of the reasons why Bangladesh, instead of having a decline in female labor force employment, female labor force had an increase. So get your priorities, and that brings us to what was the topic of the first session, is you need data and analysis, and I'm glad that Symbiosis, the Department of Economics, has a program on employment. This is a very important area. Second area is labor policies, which is where a lot of the heated debate is typically, more rigidity, more flexibility. And our sense there, we did a very careful review of the literature, is that there is a plateau where labor policies are not that relevant. Whether your minimum wage is 5% higher or 5% lower will not change dramatically the world. And then there are cliffs where you should not fall out of that plateau. One cliff is no protection, no health and safety standards. Think of Rana Plaza. Again, Bangladesh is a good model in some ways, and it's also a worrying model in other ways. The other cliff is the extreme rigidity that will get on the way of this big job creation, distraction, reallocation, Schumpeterian story that you have ahead. So message there is don't fall off the cliff, stay there, but that's not where the main action is. The main action is on the fundamentals and the growth. So let me just end with two thoughts. One about labor policies in India. Now, again, I don't want to be controversial, just mention some ideas. And second, on the fundamentals and what drives growth. On labor policy in India, our assessment was, and this from work that is still going on, is that in general, when we do benchmarking as to maternity benefits and things like that, in India is not an outlier. You compare it to other BRICS, you compare it to other countries, and it's not an outlier. But it's an outlier in two dimensions. One is the enormous complexity of the system of labor policies. more than 40 central laws, more than 200 state laws. There are thresholds at every point, 7 workers, 10 workers, 20 workers, 50 workers, where you need to be changing. If you imagine that growing firms is one of the things that brings development, each one of these steps is a hassle, and just getting through all of it is quite complicated. And then there is one area in which India is an outlier, which is on dismissal procedures. The one area where it's much more stringent, complicated, politically charged, and maybe one of the reasons why temporary employment is now so prevalent in India, because even firms in the formal sector prefer not to deal with that and just contract it out. So these are the two things we will say on the labor policy side: simplification and rethinking. And rethinking the dismissal procedures doesn't mean going into fights. So far you have so few people who are really covered by labor laws that you can afford to grandfather whatever is in there. And say new labor contracts, if you hire people formally with all the other benefits, this part doesn't apply, you can have a shorter term contract, is a way forward. The other part that I want to talk about labor policies is what it means for social protection. In a way, a lot of the labor policies have been thought with a legacy that comes from Western Europe, where the dominant relationship was between an employer and an employee, a wage worker. If you think of how the ILO is organized as an institution for the dialogue between the classes, is a tripartite organization. But that's not the way work happens in developing countries. Here you have from different regions, what part is wage employment, what part is self-employment, what part is farming. And you see that a vast majority of the people in developing countries are not in wage employment. And the green bar includes casual wage employment. We're not talking even about regular wage employment. But the way we think about benefits and social protection, very inspired by the Bismarck model in Germany, is around the job. Your benefits go around the job, you contribute around the job, you get benefits because of your employment. This is going to, one could hope that, well, gradually the light green bar will come to dominate. But what we said about the digital revolution means that no, maybe it will not happen. Maybe there will still be a lot of this kind of employment that is changing, is not always with the same employer. And at the same time, the digital revolution allows something formidable, which is you can offer formal solution to these people. An Ola driver, an Uber driver, you know how many hours the person works, you know how much the person is making, so you have all the information data set for modern social protection. It's just the thinking, the mindset of social protection around the person. And if the person today has one job and tomorrow another, today is formal, tomorrow is an informal, something that may happen a lot, protecting those benefits, protecting the portability. So rethinking social protection in this world of not everybody being a wage worker, and certainly not everybody being a regular wage worker, is an important priority. So things like universalism in social protection is important. Last one, and with this I finish, is still the fundamentals is what matters. 7 million jobs a year, you need growth for that. And India is growing very well, but you need a lot of growth for that. We did mechanical calculations of what kind of growth rates are needed. For 7 million jobs a year, the growth rate of India is enough. For the catch-up to South Asia is not enough. So this comes from a study that just came out, where with the colleagues, and we went a bit more into the urban economics approach. So basically we sliced India into more than 1,000 locations. So a location can be Pune is one location, or it can be Delhi, or it can be Chennai, but it can be something that is in between rural and urban, within a district. And we used a lot of spatial data, geosatellite imagery to really characterize these locations. And we looked at the household expenditures per capita, let's say the consumption per capita or close to income per capita, of these locations at 2 points in time, 2001 and 2011, around, it was 2012, it was a bit before 2001. And we look at which places have had the fastest growth. Now, this has to be corrected because you may get fast growth because you get migrants who are qualified and all that. So instead of looking just at the consumption per capita, we look at the premium that you get given your skills, given your average endowments in these places. You think of migrants. Migrants have the same skills in one place or another place, but there are places where they make much more, and that's why they migrate. This is a part of the productivity that comes from the environment you are in, and that's the intrinsic productivity of the place. And so we looked at these more than 1,000 places, and what we did was to try to learn who is growing fast. And is there anything in 2001 that will have allowed me to predict who will be growing faster? And there are many possible explanations. You can say about the places that had more skills, the places that had more finance, the places that had more infrastructure, the places that had better governance. So it starts becoming quite complicated because you have all sorts of competing explanations. So we identified some 40 indicators, anything from crime rates to labor laws, that we could say in this place this is what was prevailing. And we basically did a machine learning exercise. So we basically threw these into literally billions of regressions where there are algorithms that allow to tell you this variable seems to be robust no matter what other combination of variables we get. And when you go here from left to right, what you have on the left is the most robust, and as you go to right it becomes less robust, as predicted. The first most important predictor, I think this is a very positive thing, is how poor you were to begin with. The poorer you were to begin with, the faster you grow. So that's called convergence. There's a lot of debate in India about divergence, about states diverging, about the south being dynamic and the north lagging behind. And we find the evidence confirms that. But cities converge. States diverge, cities converge. It's just that the north doesn't have enough of the good cities for that convergence. But everywhere in India, the first thing is you get that convergence. Second is infrastructure comes in very strongly. Access to markets is the time it takes you to get to more GDP. Okay, it's not just the geographic distance, but also do you have a highway that gets you there. That comes number 3. Number 2 is access to electricity. So there are certain things in terms of connectivity and infrastructure that seem very strong. You have a few negatives. That's exclusion. Places that have a large share of scheduled tribes are at a disadvantage. And that's not necessarily because of the scheduled tribes themselves. So you have climate and elevation also. There are places that are not good. You have access to finance on the positive side. And then you have a couple of governance things. The labor indicator has been controversial. The most revised version of the labor indicator, rigidity does not seem to be very good. So there you have some indications when it comes to the fundamentals. I have to say that in the second block, immediately after that, you have education. So this is not to say that skills are not coming strongly, they are not coming among the top. But so I would say, again, empirically, for people who are perhaps doing studies in urban issues, understanding what are the locations, why Pune is so dynamic, what is making this place so dynamic, understanding and scaling up to India may be one way to go. So here are a few thoughts for you. Again, I hope I didn't say anything that is deemed controversial in the sense of getting into political debate. That's not at all my intention. But I think the topic of this conference is really the central topic, the right topic, and I'm delighted with what I have seen so far, and I'm sure I will enjoy the next sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative presentation. You have provided us with a 360-degree perspective of the employment issues and challenges across the globe. I'm sure this will be a valuable takeaway from the conference. I would now like to request our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Rajani Kupte ma'am, to kindly give the closing remarks.
Good afternoon. Dr. S.V. Buzumda, the Chancellor of the University and the founder of Symbiosis. Our chief guest today, that's Dr. Martin Rama, the Chief Economist for the South Asia region, the World Bank, based in Delhi. Dr. Jyoti Chandiramani, Director of the School of Economics. Dr. Thakur, the Deputy Director. Esteemed invitees, faculty members, and my dear students. As we draw to the end of this inaugural session, I think I was privileged yesterday to be part of the curtain raiser, and we have had one session this morning again with some wonderful discussions, I was told. This session, which was the inaugural session, where Dr. Mazumdar highlighted that the 67 crore young Indians represent the demographic dividend that India enjoys. But he cautioned that this needs to be nurtured through the right kind of skilling and education. Dr. Martin, thank you so much for your wonderful exposition. You spoke about the World Bank focusing on poverty reduction and how labor earning accounts for much of the decline in poverty. You very interestingly also talked about a lot of analysis on jobs, demographic dividends. Your global perspective that you provided really gave us deep insights into some of the thoughts that all of us have been reading about. Most interesting was the policy implications that you spoke about in the end, where you referred to women at work, the social spillovers. You also spoke about the complex labor laws that exist in India, in other countries in Asia. Rethinking on portability of social protection for the individual and not for the job was also very interesting. I think you're in for a feast of thoughts over the next one more day, I understand, Dr. Jyoti. We are privileged that we have so many speakers from across the country who are here, and I must take this opportunity to thank our knowledge partners for each of the tracks: Macquarie University, CTIER, ICRIER, IHD, and of course ASEF. So I think we have one more day of deliberations to go ahead. I would only like to add one small thought over here, and that's something that I often think about. Dr. Mazumdar sir referred to an aging population in Europe and in Japan. When you look at these populations, it seems correct for them to have technological innovations which are labor saving, because they have an aging problem. For them to be able to use technology to replace labor makes sense. What bothers me is that, do we really need to go that path? Can countries like India, which are labor rich, look at alternative ways in which we can enjoy the fruits of technology, yet make sure that we have enough jobs? We are talking about 13 million jobs. These people are not going to go away anywhere. If you use technology, or if you just ape the West for technology which is going to replace human labor. Yesterday, one of the speakers spoke about how the robots are coming in automobile production. He also highlighted the fact that the robots are useful in dangerous jobs like welding, etc. Certainly, those kind of innovations are absolutely critical, which help human beings to do better or save them. But do we really need to have the same kind of technologies being adopted, irrespective of our needs and our specific requirements? This is something that I often think about. We talk about agriculture. Of course, having technology which supports the agriculture is a great idea, which helps him do better, increases his productivity. But if so many people depend on agriculture, what exactly will they be doing if we adopt this kind of technology? We're talking about in the West of driverless cars, and here we have Ola, Uber giving 1 million jobs to taxi drivers in India. So I somewhere see some kind of a contradiction over here, and I often wonder, are we simply doing what the West is doing as we've always done, whether that is what we need to continue to do in the future? Just a small thought. I'm sure there will be enough food for thought over the next 2 days with your deliberations. Thank you one and all for being here. My dear students, I'm sure this is a great opportunity for all of you to listen to different ideas from people who are here from across the globe. Thank you one and all for being here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable thoughts. I now request Dr. Devdulal Thakur to give the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chancellor Professor S.B. Mujumdar, Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Rajini Gupta ma'am, Chief Economist, South Asian region of the World Bank, Dr. Martin Rama, Director, Symbiosis School of Economics and Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Science, Dr. Jyoti Chandiramani, our most valued speakers, esteemed delegates, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute honor to offer this vote of thanks. We are really grateful to our knowledge partners, Asia Foundation, Center for Technology, Innovation and Economic Research, ICRIA, Indian Council for Research and International Economic Relationship, Institute for Human Development, Macquarie University, Symbiosis Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Disha and UNDP. Thank you for all your support. Without your help, we couldn't have arranged this conference. My great sense of appreciation to all our colleagues at SSC, all our colleagues under the Symbiosis umbrella, to Dr. Amarnath Tripathi, to Dr. Ishita Ghosh, to Dr. Deepa Gupta, to Shilpi Singh, to Deepasri ji, to Vinay ji, and all who have contributed their best to organize this event. Thank you each and all. Thank you so much.
May I now request the dignitaries on the dais, panelists, speakers and faculty to kindly gather for a group photograph.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, our memories that we went down. Sir, please join us for that check.